Day 4. Right, so for today I'm going to be focusing on two aspects. You may have noticed at this point that I like to focus on two aspects. My framework is I'll work on one thing. If I get quite frustrated with this thing, I just feel like I'm stuck, I'll then pivot to the second one and alternate. And by alternating, you can make significant progress in both without feeling like you're just hitting a wall and then you don't know where to go. For today, it's going to be setting up more than the landing page. So once users have logged in, having a place where they can actually start to interact with the app, connecting that hopefully to the backend. It might be a bit ambitious, but knock on wood, we manage. I've got the prompt already that I requested earlier. Essentially getting some clear formatting for what the criteria is. So again, in the context of auto quiz, I want to be asking the starting location with the possibility of granting, your starting location, so you don't have to type it yourself, the destination, and then what your interests are. And with these 3 data points, I then trigger a webhook, which will connect to the backend. And once that's connected, I can send it back to the front end and be like, ta-da, here's your journey. And here are some questions relevant to your journey. I make it sound a lot simpler than it is. It's not going to be, a perfect quiz from the get-go, but we got something to work with. Bolt has given us the output. Now we need to check if it's actually the output we want, as usual. I've ensured that it also redirects just upon successful user login. So hopefully I remember my password for this test account, and this is what we have. Okay. I don't hate it, I don't love it, but it's got a nice feel to it. So when I submit the form, I'm redirected to the Subbase native dashboard. This should not be happening and just kept as a separate unaccessible page for now, which we will then use for managing profile/user preferences. As you can tell, it's not really the feel we're looking for, but it is still good to see that it's there and it corresponds to what we have on the authentication side with Subbase here. Okay, so at this point, when I submit the form, I want it to be passing 2 webhooks. What do I mean by that? Firstly, with the starting point and the destination, I actually want to use a tool which is going to dot 10 locations, more or less 10 locations, and retrieve these location names so that I can then work with them afterwards to retrieve a relevant question to those areas, assuming they are going from point A to point B in a direct line. It's a gross oversimplification of how people travel, but it's a starting point, right? This is where we're at. Secondly, second webhook is essentially just going to be passing the starting location, because when the user submits their form, then they're just interested in, starting. And so we need a good question to start with. I've made a few tweaks. Firstly, ensuring that there's enough options for the user to select what they're actually interested in retrieving, information about. Secondly, the animation is really slow when it comes to, loading a good question. So I've got some random prompts that will make it hopefully a bit more entertaining for the user to be patient. And lastly, formatting the webhook in proper JSON with the right names so that my backend on an N8n side can recognize it properly. As is often the case, you will have issues connecting your front end with your backend. In my case, I'm not fully understanding why it is that N8n, specifically the AI agent, is hallucinating. So it is generating questions. That's a good start, but it is generating questions which have nothing to do with the starting location. I'm getting questions about radio waves in Rome, which are seemingly not connected as far as I know. Maybe I'm going to learn a shit ton as well. But let's see. All right, if Claude, right, as part of the debugging process, can identify what's going wrong. Claude Sonnet, comparing one that worked where I manually put it in as opposed to another one, the difference is here. So here it's suggesting that currently Bolt is passing an object, whereas I'm expecting a string to accommodate a bit more for flexibility. And that seems to have fixed it. I believe we have a relevant question about Paris, which was our starting location. And last but not least, we need to now retrieve that webhook data and actually display in some somewhat comprehensive way the question and a way to interact with this question as well. Rather ambitiously, I've interacted with Claude to basically give it a comprehensive request of it, having a slide bar as the user completes the journey and gets closer to unlocking specific questions, simultaneously retrieving the questions from the back end. If the new location is unlocked, triggering the webhook, essentially all the functionality elements. I've just bombarded both Claude and Bolt, but at the same time whilst trying to be very, very precise in my language. And I'm extremely curious to see if I've crashed the website or if we're able to make something incredible. I have to say, so far, and again, not sponsored, I'm thoroughly impressed with Bolt's ability through planning to actually structure concisely and cohesively what it is that I'm looking to do, taking into account many elements. And I really appreciate the asking questions as opposed to just like, oh, I'm confident, I know what you want, I'm going to build it, and here you go, ta-da, and then it's not what you want. I would much rather have a, significant back and forth than just, okay, build it, make it magic, and then it crashes and, no one's surprised. With a fresh coffee, let's see what Bolt cooked up. It's not looking too bad, but we're having some issue where we're stuck, a loading screen error, we're stuck on processing your journey locations, as you can read. I'm not sure why that's triggering. When I look at the executions, we're retrieving the locations as expected, and we are getting the question we want. But somehow it's not being passed properly. Yes, so we're happy with that. Somehow it's not being passed correctly to the front end. So let's check with Bolt. We seem to be stuck loading. I believe the locations are returned to us within seconds from the webhook. So there's about 4 or 5 seconds from A to B. These should display first and then the loading animation. So this one can display within the widget of the starting location where we'll be asking the question. So again, within 4.3 seconds, we get the locations. So far, when it comes to the agent, it's taking more than 30 seconds. I think we're at a 45-second average, which again is far from ideal, but it's what we have to work with for now. Perhaps it would make more sense, instead of this loading, that as soon as possible it displays the locations to move to the next page, and then the question itself is loading. I'm going to use plan. So again, this will use more tokens, but for critical parts of your app, you might want to consider doing it but sparingly, not for everything, not for every single step. Otherwise you're just going to run out of tokens so quickly. Okay, so as expected, we're experiencing the same error. At least we've got a bit more of a comprehensive explanation as to why. This is not the time to be spamming Bolt saying, hey, fix this, why is this not working? Take a different perspective, take a step back, ask a different agent, ask a friend if you have a friend that can look at your code as well. It can always help, because in this instance, you're going to run out of tokens so quickly if you stay obsessed over the problem. I've made this mistake before. Trust me, it's an expensive mistake to make. First things first, I'm going to be starting the debugging process on a different browser because, as I've mentioned before, Brave browser is a bit restrictive when it comes to API and just cookies as a whole, which is what I like as someone who's navigating the internet, but as a developer, it can be a bit more complicated than you might hope. So I've enabled it to access my location, so this time it's requested it and it's got what it's looking for, but it still seems to be a similar error. So good news is, at least it's not my browser. Let's see what we get in the console. I've tested, I'm certain it's not a browser issue, so I can continue the debugging on Brave for now. And I'm just going to be asking Bolt to show me where it is finding that webhook response so that I can maybe look at the code base myself or just understand a bit better what's going on. I believe I've identified part of the issue. When it comes to the question, we are uploading it directly to the Supabase database, but I'm uploading it actually at the wrong database. And so AutoQuiz is obviously trying to read the database that it's connected to, and it's not finding any questions. So of course it can't make anything up on itself by itself. But what I don't understand is why this webhook, when it comes to the locations, isn't working. However, I'm going to call it here for today. I knew it was a bit ambitious to try and include everything when it comes to Stripe and such. Going to continue working a bit off camera and get that fixed because we still really want to target that front-end, back-end connection and such. But that's the reality of coding, vibe coding, creating, building. You're going to run into walls occasionally. If all else fails, grab another coffee, maybe go on a walk for 5 minutes and come back to it, and then you can have a blast again. If you've made it this far, as always, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I wish you have a good day.